Last year, I went over to my brother's house and we used the time of flight sensor on the Galaxy Note 10 Plus to make a 3D capture of an object and then used his 3D printer to fully print it out. Ever since then, I haven't been able to stop thinking about all the little things that he was able to fix with a 3D printer in his home and just other fun little things to print around the house. So in today's video, we're gonna change that. This is the FlashForge USA Creator Max. Let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome to Tech with Brett, where I help tech work for you. So FlashForge USA reached out to see if I wanted to check out their Creator Max 3D printer. Now they did send this product to me today so that I could make this review. Now at my brother's house, I did notice that even though his 3D printer costs a lot less, he ended up needing to keep buying little parts, or he was having trouble with one thing or another. So the Creator Max 3D printer offers an all-in-one solution where pretty much you plug it in, get it installed, and then you're ready to start 3D printing. So I'm really excited to see if this is the all-in-one solution for you. Now this does cost $879. I'll leave a link in the description below if you're interested in checking out the product. Now some really cool things about the Creator Max is it has a heated build plate, an LED screen with touchscreen interface. It has an acrylic cover, so it's fully enclosed, has temperature controls, a dual extruder, a metal frame, 6.5mm build plate, Wi-Fi connection and cloud printing, support for different types of filaments, and it comes with the latest 3D components for reliability. So let's go ahead and get this unboxed, set up, and start printing. At the top of the box here, you have the instructions that actually lays out exactly how to unbox this. Here we have a 16 gig SD card, a leveling card, as well as 2 extra build plate tapes. And then we also have 2 filament guides up here at the top. And then here inside the box, we have 2 spool holders, the power cable, and the extruder that we need to install. So let's pull this out and get that installed. The Creator Max does weigh about 50 pounds, so you may need some help getting it out of the box. The manual does have step-by-step instructions on how to unbox this, but I'm just going to give you a high overview of what is in here. So to get everything out, we will need to remove this top styrofoam with the extruder. Then we need to snip the 4 clips on the guide rod so that we can slide it back and pull out the filament here, as well as the lid. To remove the last part of styrofoam, I just needed to pull up on the build plate to move it up so that I could pull out the styrofoam. Once it was out, we can then peel off the plastic here. So here we have the dual extruder we'll install in just a second, but then we also have 2 spool holders that will go on the back here. Now these do require the proper filament that can lock onto them. Here we have a power cable. We also have a USB cable, and then the tools we will need to install the extruder and a few extra things I don't really know what they're for. Now that we have everything out of the box, we will need to install the extruder. This is the only hard portion of the install, but it should only take 5 or 10 minutes. So here we just need to screw in the extruder. So here you want to make sure that the fans are at the front of the machine like it is placed now. And then we're just going to set this on the extruder seat, and there are 2 screws that we will screw it in from the bottom. In this bag, you have the turbofan baffle that you will install, and then there are 3 screws in here. We'll take the 2 longer screws and screw them into the bottom of the extruder. It does come with an Allen wrench, so no extra tools will be required. Now we are going to install the turbofan baffle, and how we're going to do this is we are going to remove these 2 bolts here. We're going to attach it and then put it back together. So there's 1 bolt. There's the second. So this just comes off like that. And now I just need to place this on like so. Now it doesn't really lock on or anything, but now we're going to put those 2 bolts back in, and we are going to use the 3rd bolt in the extruder kit to attach it to the extruder. There is a bump on the turbofan seat to allow it to rest in there, so make sure that locks in first before you put the bolts back in. And then there is a spot for the 3rd screw right under here. All right, and now the extruder is fully installed. Now the next step is to install the 2 spool holders. So all we're going to do is we're going to place them here in the back, just like so. They just rest in there. So now we're going to install the filament. So again, this does have a dual extruder, so it can use 2 filaments at once. So over here on the left, when you install the filament, you would want it to feed in a counterclockwise manner. And then over here on the right, when you install it, you want it to feed at a clockwise manner so that it's not going to get tangled at all, and it's going to go right here to the extruder. So I'll be getting a second filament later, but let's just install this right here. So to install this, it looks like I need to squeeze this just a little bit to push on, and then there it snaps on and it fits great. Now before we load the filament into the extruder, we're going to power on the device. So on the back here, we have the power cable input. And then here you have a master on and off. So we're going to plug that in. And also just for other ports on the device, over here on the right side, we have the SD card slot and the USB input, and it also has Wi-Fi built in. And now we're going to add the 2 filament guide tubes. So this will go right into the extruder, and then it will line up here into the guides. With a little bit of force, you're able to lock them in. Start at the bottom, that seems to help the best. Snaps in, and we can place that right in there. Now to install the filament. So the first thing we're going to do is remove the guide tube from the extruder, and then we're going to power on the printer. Press tools. We're going to select filament. So now it's asking which one you want to load, so the left or the right. So when looking at the machine, here we're going to be loading the right side. And while it's doing that, I'm going to load the filament through the guide tube here. Okay, now it's ready for us to add the filament. So here I'm just going to place it in here. And once it touched, it already started pulling out the filament. So once it's straight, hit done, and our filament is loaded. All right, so it hasn't taken very long, but at this point we have already installed the extruder and we've already loaded the filament, and we are just about ready to start printing. I'm really excited to do this. So the next step is actually to get the build plate right here to be level. If it's not level, it's not going to print correctly. So let's do that now. And then here we have the special sheet for building a level plate. So adjust the nut under the platform until you can slide the sheet between the nozzle and the build plate back and forth with slight resistance. Okay, so here we're going to go back. We're going to go into tools. And then here we're going to go to level. Okay, so here I'm going to slide this into the right. If it doesn't fit, I'm going to turn the knob here. I'm going to turn it counterclockwise to lower. So here I can move the paper, but it is a little grippy on the top and the bottom. Okay, once that's good, I'm going to select next, and now it's going to align to its next position. Now it's in the second position, and we're actually going to be using the nut here at the back. So there are 3 different positions, but there is a nut back here that we can't see that I'll be adjusting. All right, that seems like the same friction. Now we're gonna go next. And now we're gonna go to the 3rd nut location. So it's tight, so I'm going to go counterclockwise. Okay, now I can fit it in there. Okay, and then we're going to select next. Okay, so now it's going to go to the 4th position in the center of the plate, and we're going to make sure that the card can slide through with the same friction and adjust the nuts as needed. Okay, I think that's good. Now we're going to select finish. Now for the dimensions of the Creator Max, you do need to find a good area to put this. Now your length here is going to be about 20 inches you'll need with the handles. The depth, around 17 inches. And then the height there with the protector here at the top would be 22 inches. So the next step is to plug in the USB cable to the Creator Max and then into your computer. And then we're going to install the FlashPrint software that comes on the 16 gigabyte SD card. So here you have a few different folders. You even have the user guide here, but we're just going to head into the FlashPrint folder. And then you can see that you have a Mac version as well as a Windows version. So I'm just going to extract the 64-bit option and install it on the computer. Now the first thing it's asking for is which printer we have. So we're going to scroll down here. We have the Creator Max, so that's what we're going to select. And now we have FlashPrint ready to go. Next, we need to load a 3D file. So this could be a .stl file, a .obj. FlashPrint even allows you to import pictures and it can convert it into a 3D object, but this will not allow you to create those objects. So you can go and use other 3D software to create those. I prefer going to thingiverse.com, and there are a ton of different options here of things already made that I can just download and print. And so for this first print, I saw this cool little Apple TV remote holder. My dad has an Apple TV, and so they got this remote that nobody can ever find. So I'm gonna print this out and give it to him. And so you come in here and you can see what the actual print will look like. Here it's showing the STL file, or what it will look like in your 3D software. Down here you have a summary so you can read more about this specific print. And then here it's telling us if we need certain things like rafts or supports, which here it doesn't say that we need that. Now, I highly recommend checking out the comments to see what other people tried and what worked for them. So here, this first one, he's saying that it doesn't fit. So that's not good. But then the next one said, printed it at 105% to fix the size issue, works perfectly. So, all right, some people were able to get it to print and work. Then you also have the option to look under make. So I can come in here and I can look at all the different people that made it and what it looked like. So I'm pretty happy with this. Now, here are different types of colors of filament that you could use. Again, we're using the red transparent. So if you really like the design and it worked well for you, you come back in here and you can tip the designer, but we are just going to download the file. So it downloaded there, and then you just need to extract that file. And now I'm going to head back into the FlashPrint software, and up here at the top I just need to select load, and then here I have my .stl file. We're going to open that up and it puts it right here on the platform. You may get a little pop-up that says move it onto the platform, and you would select yes. So here I can navigate around, I can hold shift and look around. Down here on the bottom you can see that it's blue, indicating that it is sitting flat on the build plate. So then we have some other options. Let's say I wanted to move it somewhere. So over here I can select move, and then I can just drag it wherever I want. Here you can see that when it goes to red, it's not fitting on the build area. So you can go all the way up to the edge. If I zoom out here, you can see that build area. As for the total size you can actually print, here it is 227 millimeters wide, or 8.9 inches. Here it is 148 millimeters deep, or 5.8 inches, and you can print up to 150 millimeters or 5.9 inches. Next we have the rotate option, so you could rotate this. Maybe you want to change the way it's printing. You could rotate it this way or whatever. If you rotate one of the other ways, you're going to run into some problems. Here you can see it's showing red on the bottom. So if I had it like this, you can see it's going to cut off the print. So just need to make sure that there are no red indicators. Here I have the scale. So they said they scaled it up. So I can come in here and scale it up just by selecting up here. And now we are at 105%, and you could see the model increase as I did that. Here you have the option to cut. So if you have a print that's too big to fit in one print, you could actually cut off the top, and then you can come back and print the second part later and cut off the bottom. So all you need to do is select cut, select what you want to cut, and then draw a line, and then start the cut. And there you can see here, it just split that right in half. And so it would print those two different things, but that's really not going to work for this. So let's undo that. And then lastly, we have the extruder here. So this is where we can choose which extruder is going to print. So we have the right extruder is gray and the left extruder is green. So we'll use that later as well. So once everything looks good, you then need to decide if you want a support. So up here you have the supports option. So you only need a support if it's trying to print something and there's nothing underneath. So let's say this Apple leaf didn't have this bottom piece. You would need to add a support to keep it floating in air because it can't print into thin air. So we'll get more into that, but now we are ready to print. So I'm going to select print. I'm going to choose the type of material I want. Here I have standard resolution. And here, sometimes it checks the wall. We only use that if we're going to use the dual extruder. So I'm going to uncheck that. Then down here, I have all kinds of options where I can change the shells, the infill, so how much is being filled, the type of pattern, speed, and other options there. So that all looks good, so I'm going to select OK, and now it is going to save a file that is a .gx code. So this is the actual file the printer reads to print. So here you can see exactly what that print is going to look like. It adds this little strip here so that it can have a nice clean print at the bottom. And then over here in the bottom corner, it shows you how many layers. So this is going to be 140 different layers. And then up here in the top right, it says it's going to take 1 hour and 56 minutes, and it's going to use 12.68 meters of material. And then you could do a weight estimation if you care about that. Or you can check out the slice parameters, make sure everything looks good before you send it to the printer. Now we are ready to print. So I'm just going to select print up here, connect to machine. So down here on the bottom right, you can see that it is connected. And now I just need to select send G code. It's going to send that file to the printer, warm up, and then start printing. So right now it's just warming up the printer to print. Here you can see the temperature is rising. And once it warms all the way up, it started printing. So here it starts with a pre-extrusion, and then it begins with the first layer. So watching this is really fun to do, making sure it all looks good, and this is going down really well. So now we're just gonna wait and then see how long this takes. So the print has finished, and here it says it took 2 hours and 17 minutes, about 12 minutes longer than it previously said it would take, but it is all done. Now to get this off, looks like there's a little string hanging here. So it's actually on there pretty good. Let me just pull a little bit harder. All right, got it off. That was stuck on there pretty good, but look at this really nice print. Now, even though this was standard quality, I'm very impressed with how it looks. Now, this is transparent, so you can see the hexagon pattern there, but the adhering to the build plate worked really good, and just, it's a very nice print. Now, this is much lighter than I originally thought it would be because it's hollow, but let's see if this will fit. So it slides right in there. Now, because I did increase the size, it's a tiny bit loose on the right and the left side, but it fits the front and the back, which is probably why it wasn't fitting for the other people that printed this, but that looks really great. So the first print is now complete, and I am very impressed. So there were absolutely no issues in the printing process. It only took 12 more minutes than it said it would to print, and the quality is just really fantastic. Again, this was the standard quality for the print. Getting it off was a little bit hard. I did just warm up the heat plate, and then I was able to pretty much pull it off really easily. For the second print, I'm now going to test out the dual extruder function. So this will allow me to print 2 different types of filament on one print, which is just really crazy. So there are these little cube fidget spinners that my brother was making. So I want to print that out, but using the 2 different colors. So now let's remove the filament here, load those up, and I'll show you how you can adjust the colors over on the computer. So the first step is to unload the previous filament. So I'm just going to come in here and unload the right filament. It's then going to warm up so I can take it out. It'll then give you a notification when it's heated up. And then to pull it out, there's just this lever on the side that you push down, and then you can pull out the old filament. Now I'm going to add the 2 different filaments to the left and the right extruder. So now to remove this, I just need to pinch right here. It easily slides off just like that. Okay, so I think I found the first main issue with the Creator Max is these spool holders that it comes with don't allow for third-party filaments to be put on. So here, there's no lip around the inside, but here on the FlashForge filament, you have this little lip right here. So when you put this onto the spool holder, it's able to lock there into place, so it's gonna have a nice fit. If I pinch it, pull it off, and put this on, here you can see that even though it's pressed in all the way, it doesn't lock in right there. So it's just gonna slide off. It locks here at the end, but that doesn't make it very nice. And it could even fall off. So we're just gonna try it this way, see if it works, but I might need to go ahead and print some other spool holders so that I can use third-party filaments. In here on the right side, it needs to go counterclockwise. And again, for the left extruder, we're gonna make sure that it turns clockwise. Here's a little pro tip from my brother that when you are storing your filament, make sure you store the silica gel inside and close it off nicely so that this can keep it so that there's no moisture in here and it will let the filament last longer. After a print finished, I got in the habit of leveling the printer every time so that it was automatically ready for the next print. It seemed to work really well. Also, just an FYI, for all the time lapses you're seeing, I actually attached an indoor nest cam to the Creator Max. There isn't a camera built in, so this worked really well. You could also get a cheap Wise Cam version 2, and I think that would do a really great job as well. Now for the fidget cube, I need to find a print that is able to print 2 different colors. For this, I'm just going to look for dual option. So here I found a fidget cube version 2 with dual color. So that means it can do the 2 different colors. So we're gonna download this and import it into FlashPrint. Now when importing this file, there are actually 2 different files. So there's gonna be one file for the right extruder and one file for the left extruder. So there's the first file, and then we're just going to select load, choose the other file, and then load it in. Now we will need to make sure that we highlight both of these if we're going to move it around, but I'm just gonna leave it right here. And now we need to choose which extruder prints what part. So here I'm going to select one of the objects, and then I'm going to go over to extruder and choose which one is going to print that portion. So here I'm going to select use left extruder, and here you can see the 2 different colors that it is set. So that means one's going to use the left and one is going to use the right. Now we're going to head into the print menu, and here you do have the option to change the filament per extruder. We're going to leave it how it is. PLA is what we want. And we're not going to select supports or rafts. And then when everything looks good, I'm going to hit print. Now it is giving me an error that you should add a raft or a wall when you're using the dual extruder to help print, but I'm not sure about that right now. So we're going to try it without it and see what happens. So here I'm going to ignore this warning, create the GX code, and then send it to the printer. Now for this print, it looked like everything worked well. So it started off really great. We have the 2 filaments here. It's going back and forth between them, and it is adhering well to the build plate. Now you will notice that the colors that it's printing are actually different. This is actually color changing filament. So I thought it would be a really fun effect to have that. But looking at the print now, you can see that it has all these weird edges around the outside. Now this is because I didn't use the wall, and every time it changes to the new color, there's a little bit of filament left over in the extruder, so it causes that little problem around the outside edge. So this is just a learning process, so when you do the dual filament, you will need to use the wall. Now let's check on the spools on the back. So there you can see it's working, but here on the green filament, it kind of came off a little bit. But it's still working just fine. So we're just gonna leave this and let the print finish. Looks like everything is going well so far. Now when a print starts off well, I'll usually leave it and then come back and check on it later. And when I came back, this is what I found. Now this is not what I wanted to have happen, and is what happened is the green filament got so wrapped up on the spool holder, it was so stuck, it could not pull any more filament out, and it just stopped printing the green filament. Now after getting the print off, it looks pretty good, but then trying to break it apart, it just wasn't done all the way, so it just kind of fell into pieces and was very brittle. I probably should have used a little more infill, but it's good I didn't since it ended up failing. So I think the next step is to get some new spool holders, and I don't want to go buy any, so let's just print them. I'm going to head to Thingiverse and see what I can find. So I found these 2 different spool holders that said they would work with the Creator Pro. It's a very similar model to the Creator Max, so we're gonna try them out. I'm gonna start with this yellow one as it did get more likes and views, so we're gonna do that first, and it did require supports, so let me show you how to do that. So loading it into FlashPrint, here you can see it's not properly on the build plate, so I just need to select yes, and now it has been oriented properly. So now we need to add the support. So all I need to do is tap the supports at the top of the screen, And now we are in the supports edit menu. So you can tap supports options, or here I'm just going to select auto supports. And what this is going to do, it's automatically going to generate supports. So any part of the object that wasn't sitting flat on the build plate, it will then need to build a support so that it can hold up that object. Now under here, I do have a few different settings. So it did say that they used supports at 45 degrees. So make sure you don't go any less than that. And then here I'm choosing the tree-like supports, and here I can regenerate those, and everything looks pretty good. Now, if you do want to manually add supports, you can do that over on the left-hand side, but this looks great. So now we're just going to select back and head into the print menu. Now, when we select back, it asks if we want to save a new file with the supports. So yes, I'm going to do that. And now we are going to go into the print options. So again, we're going to keep the PLA and everything the same, but we do need to select to add the supports. If we say disable, it's not going to print those supports. I learned from experience, and you will not have a good model. So make sure that you enable supports, and then you can go through and choose the rest of your settings. And for this, because there are so many little tiny supports on the build plate, I also want to have a raft so that it has a nice build plate to build on. I did try printing the supports without the raft, and all those tiny little circles ended up falling off, and it made a mess. So a raft was able to help keep all the supports on the build so that I had a really nice finished product. Once all the settings look right, we're going to select OK to create the GX code, and then it will show us exactly what the build is going to look like. So this is it with the supports and the raft. If it looks anything like this, you need to make sure that you don't print that, because that doesn't have any supports and it's just not going to work. But this is what our final product would look like. Now for this, I'm actually going to load it on my SD card and go over to the printer and print it. So here we just need to place it into the side of the Creator Max. And then from the main menu, we need to select print. Here we have the SD card in the middle, and then it will show you all the folders that you have on your SD card. So we are going to go into the prints folder, and then scrolling down, it will show you all the prints that you have available here, and it shows a nice little picture with them. And then here we're going to choose the universal spool, and now I just need to select print. It has all of the supports and everything saved, and then it will start warming up the printer and print. And here it's starting off with the raft, and then you can see the supports there on the side, and it goes through and it does the whole print, and it worked excellent. So I highly recommend picking up some of these clippers from Klein. I learned that if I clipped the very bottom of the raft here, I could then use a plastic scraper, and I was able to peel off the prints much better than just trying to pull them off. It still took a little bit of work, but it definitely was easier. And now that we have our print here, you can see all of the supports and everything that are attached. Now we need to remove those, and the supports do a pretty good job where you should be able to easily break them off, but this is where it's nice to have those clippers where I can then break any part of the filament off that just won't separate, especially the raft part of the print. All right, getting the supports and the raft off took a bit of work, but the print came out pretty great. So here you can see it's going to be able to hold much more spool. So here, if we put this on, there you get a pretty good overhang. So I'd like to find one that didn't have so much, but there it's able to spin, no problem. Let's try it out on the back. Pop that off. Put this one on, just like so. That is great. Now, since I can use 2 filaments on this, I decided to go ahead and print a second. Now, when I imported this other type of spool holder, it was very small. Now, let me quickly show you how you can fix something that you import like this so that it is the proper size for what you want it to actually be when you print it. The first thing we need to do is change our view. So we're going to change this from perspective to orthographic. So that allows it to be a exact lineup from the build plate to what you're seeing. And then we're going to head to the top view. So the perspective would skew it a little bit. This allows all the lines to line up properly. So now I'm just going to get the scale option, and then I can just increase the numbers here, or I could drag the object and scale it up until it is the proper size. Now, what's the proper size? Well, I measured the filament and it's about 60 millimeters that I need. So I want the portion that's going to hold the filament to be bigger than 60 millimeters so that it can fit on there easily. So I'm going to adjust the scale until it fits 6 centimeters here inside this top portion. So here I'm just going to keep adjusting it until it lines up the way I want it to. So I'm going to go through, keep counting these. I'm actually going to make it about 7 centimeters so the filament can fit on there without any issues. Now, once I have that right, you can move it around. So here I could line it up exactly where I want it to go. And now I think the size is correct. Now we're going to switch back to the perspective view. It's just a little easier to look at. But one thing it mentioned in the comments is that you need to print this with the bottom portion flat on the build plate. It was supposed to save time and just be easier to print. So now we need to rotate the object. So here I'm going to go into the rotate portion, and now I'm going to rotate the red 90 degrees. Now you could click and drag and try to get 90 degrees, but that's hard to do. So I'm just going to come over here on the side, and then I can click the plus 90 or minus 90 option until it is oriented correctly. Now we have it, but it's not sitting flush on the build plate. So now we need to go to the move portion, and we need to move the Z up to 0. And when you put Z at 0, it then is sitting flush on the build plate. So if I look at the bottom, you'll notice that it's all blue, and so everything is going to work great. And then the last thing that we need to do is make sure that we have supports, because this back portion, it can't print that without supports. So now all I need to do is select supports, auto, and now it generates the supports, but this looks like a ton of supports. Really, we only need supports for this back portion of the object. We don't need supports for all this middle section. So over here on the right, I can select delete, and then I can just go through and delete all those supports that aren't needed. Now it could print that way, and that should work fine, but the way that this was modeled was to not need that many supports. So I'm going to go through, delete all the ones on the side, just leaving the ones on the back. I'm still going to use a raft because I have the supports on the back. And now that it looks good, I'm going to go through the printing setup, making sure that I have the supports enabled and the raft, and then print it out. Now for this print, I changed the filament out again, and I'm using a blue ABS filament. So one great thing about the Creator Max is it can use different types of filaments. Whether they fit on the back or not is a different story, but so far this ABS worked actually really well. I've heard that you do need to have an enclosure to have ABS work great, and with this print I had no problems. Again, using the clippers and the scraper, I was able to get it off. Now I also want to mention that each time there is a little bit of cleanup you need to do on the build plate. Haven't really shown, but those clippers came super handy to be able to clean off the build plate every single time. And here is the final print. The size turned out really great. I love this blue color. And the ABS is some really great quality filament. Yes, it does fit. So there you go. At about 70 millimeters, we have plenty of space. And adding these spool holders to the back of the Creator Max, you can see how great those look. I'm really excited that now I can use any type of filament, no matter what the case is like. Now, since we're back here, I did want to make one more improvement on this. So I printed a new filament guide for the little filament guide tube. So before, the filament was pulling right up next to the machine, and it just didn't look very good. It was kind of tight. So I decided to print this filament guide that moves the filament to the middle of the filament, so it kind of just looks a lot better. And then you just place the filament tubes in here, and it worked really, really well. So here is what it looks like as it's pulling out the filament. You can see that it's moved to the middle as it's going through. So I just think after printing these 3 things on the back, I've really improved how the Creator Max works here. Too bad all those things weren't included, but that's why you have a 3D printer, so that you can fix and improve things that you already have. Now that I have 2 new spool holders for the filament that I have, we're going to come in here to FlashPrint, go to File, and go to Examples, and add this little Hilbert cube. So this is one portion of the cube. And now let's go ahead and add the second portion of the cube. And I thought it would be really cool to print this in 2 different filaments. Now you can print these one at a time and use supports, and it's kind of a cool little design just to have, but I thought it'd be fun to use the dual extruder. So here we're just going to go to the extruder, And here we're going to change one to the left extruder. So now we have the two different colors here. And now we're going to head into the print menu and print this properly. So we're going to change this to PLA on both of these. I'm going to use the color changing filament I have. And then we don't need any supports for this because it's sitting fully on the ground. And now I should add a wall and a raft, but I'm just going to select OK. Now when I do this, it says, hey, because you're using the dual extruder, it's best if you have a wall. So I'm going to select yes this time to add the wall. And then it says with a wall, you also need to add a raft. So I'm going to select add raft as well. Now I'm going to save the GX file. And here we can see what the print is going to look like. So there you can see the wall around the edge. It has the raft as well as the pre-extrusion for both colors on the bottom. So that looks great. Now I'm going to send the G code to the printer and try it out. Now there are options where you can choose what filament is going to print the raft, but I think it just shows the default option here. And you can see that it's printing that raft, and so far it's working really well. Now when looking at the time lapse of this, you'll see those same types of edges where they don't look very clean, but this time it's actually happening on the wall. So the print inside is going to work really well. The wall is what it's printing a little bit of each color on every time it does a new layer. So you have the imperfections there instead of on the actual print. And the raft on the bottom makes sure that everything sticks great, especially the wall. And here is the final print. This looks really cool. So there you have the two different wall colors, and then we have our little Hilbert cube in the middle here. So let's pull this off and remove the raft and the wall. So here you can see how important that wall is when using the dual extruder. And now getting it off, again, takes some work. Having these clippers though was just so handy to have because I was able to just clip the wall off. And then the raft on this one, I did leave it overnight when it printed, but the raft was really hard to get off. So it took me a while, but I finally was able to get everything off. And here it is without the wall or the main portion of the raft. And I would say that this is a really high quality print. It's crazy how close the layers can get to each other. And this is a really nice constructed block. I finally finished pulling off the raft, and now you can see the cube here. So that is the side where the raft was on. So I don't know if sanding or something could help that, but here it is. It looks really cool having both colors. You can see there's a few imperfections here and there where it didn't get it right, but for the most part, this worked really well. Now for the last print today, we're going to set this up so that we can print over Wi-Fi. So I'm going to go into the settings here and go into Wi-Fi, and we're going to turn the Wi-Fi on. Just a quick side note, you can't use the SD card while you have Wi-Fi enabled. Once it is turned on, it has then created an SSID that we can connect to over on our computer. So here in the network settings, I now have the option to connect to Creator Max. So I'm going to select connect. And then I'm going to head to my web browser and type in 10.10.100.254. And then here it is asking for the username and password. By default, it is admin. And once we are logged in, here we can see the status of our printer, and we have a few different settings. So by default, it is an AP mode. So it's like a hotspot, but I actually want to come in here in the Wi-Fi settings, and I'm going to change this to STA mode. So that will allow it to connect directly to my Wi-Fi router so that it will always be available while I'm connected to my network to print to. And then under STA mode at the bottom, I need to type in my Wi-Fi router and password, hit save, and then it's giving me a prompt that I need to restart the Creator Max for this to work. So I'm just going to select restart. Now we are going to go up to print and say connect to machine. Here I have a Wi-Fi and Ethernet selected, and then I need to add the printer IP address. This can be found in the Wi-Fi settings of the Creator Max now that we've adjusted to STA mode. And then here I type this in, select connect, and now it will show that it's connected in the bottom right corner. And now to print something, we just need a load file just like we normally would. This file I actually created from my phone, the Galaxy S20 Ultra, and they did an update where you can now scan faces. So it's gonna be really cool to have this own customized print of mine that I can do. Now loading it in, it was really small, so I'm gonna go through the process of increasing the size, getting it oriented right until it is where I want it to be. Now I probably need supports because my chin is sticking pretty far out, but when I did the auto supports, it didn't work. Later I found out that a setting was checked where it would only do supports on the platform. So I should have unchecked that. But for this one, let's go ahead and choose high quality to see how that looks. And I'm also printing this with ABS. And I'm also going to add a raft, and then I'm going to print. Let's see how it does. So once we have our GX file here, again, I am already connected to the printer over Wi-Fi, so I just need to select Send G-Code. It's then going to download that over on the Creator Max and begin the print. All right, so it looks like Brett Terminator Edition is complete, and we ran into a bit of a problem. Pull it off here, take a closer look. That is a pretty nice looking print. So something happened right there where it just did not work well, and it started to bubble up, but still pretty cool looking. So for something that I was able to create from my phone and print off in high quality, I'm very impressed with this print. So if I would have added a support, I think it would have turned out really perfect. I might need to try this again, but really happy with the results here. Now I mentioned in the beginning, you can just add a picture and it creates its own file. So you can add PNGs, JPEGs, BMPs. So here I loaded a PNG of my logo, and then it gives you a few options in how this works. So you can have it have the light as thicker or the dark as thicker. And then when you import it, here you can have the picture. So it's taken all the different parts of the picture and extruded it so that you have a nice little picture here. So this doesn't have very many layers. It prints pretty quick, but it's a fun little thing that you can do just by taking any picture you already have and loading it up. Now there are different styles. This is just the plain. You could have it print as a tube or a canister or even a lamp. And then you could also have it be a seal. So some really fun things you can do with a basic picture. Here is the end result. A little dark here, but turned out pretty cool. Now it really wouldn't be a Tech with Brett video unless I added something smart home based to this. So I actually attached a switch bot here next to the power switch, because if I leave the office and it finishes printing, it just stays on and the fan is spinning. So here I added a switch bot, and then I can just easily turn it off at any time. Now, one of the hardest things about doing a 3D printer review is there are so many different variables. It could depend on what type of filament you're using or what heat settings you have. You could have the same printer but have a different experience. So I'm just going to tell you what I kind of learned and how it went with the Creator Max, and you may have the same experience or not, but overall I'm impressed with what the Creator Max can do. It is a very powerful and reliable machine. I've been using the Creator Max for a few weeks now, and I've done my best to constantly keep it printing. This last print is one of my favorites that I've done. It did take a little bit more work, but the end result I'm really excited about. So here I have a custom Tech with Brett logo that I can lay here on my desk. So I'm going to turn the printer off during this review just so the fan isn't spinning in the background. So over these weeks, I've printed all kinds of things. I printed this logo. I've printed my face taken from my phone. I printed controller holders. I printed phone holders with the controller. Now that's one of the great things about 3D printing, that there is never an end. If you can think it up, you pretty much are able to print it. All the things here, I was like, hey, it would be cool if I could print this. I was able to find the file, print it, and then I have it here and I'm able to use it. And I haven't even got to designing things that I want to print yet. That will hopefully come later down the road. It does take a little bit more work. So now let's talk about the full printing process. So the first thing is to find a file. Now I do have a bit of a design background, so I could go in and design some of these things, but some were just a little too complicated. So it's nice that there is already a repository of tons of different files that you can find on Thingiverse. Now, once you find something you want to print, it was very simple to load it into FlashPrint. I felt FlashPrint was very easy to use, and there were a ton of features. So some of the features I didn't find and the prints didn't work well just because I didn't know about the software fully. But after using it for a while, there are a ton of things FlashPrint can do. If you are looking for an expert mode, FlashPrint has that as well. So I found this later that you can go in and turn on the expert mode where it will really open up what FlashPrint can do. And there are a lot of features in here that I don't know what they do, but if you're really into critiquing what your printer can do, FlashPrint is able to do that. One other cool feature I found in FlashPrint is you can actually adjust the LEDs of the Creator Max. So you have all kinds of different colors that you can choose here. I didn't find this out until after I had done all my prints, but that would be a fun way to change the look of the print while it's printing. Now that our file looks great here in FlashPrint, let's talk about the 3 different ways in which you can load that file onto the Creator Max. One, of course, was the plugged into your computer, which that worked great. You just plug it in, it connects, you can load it over, no problem. Next was the SD card. That was really convenient. I moved the printer to another room, so I could just load it on the SD card, come over here, plug it in, and then I would print. Now, if there was a problem, it was nice. I could just pull it right back up. Now that was really nice, but sometimes I did have to redo the print just because it didn't print properly. So I had to come back to the computer, create that GX code file again, put it on the SD card and move back. So nice, but not the most convenient. Now next we have the Wi-Fi. So once I had it set up on the Creator Max and I was connected to my Wi-Fi, I was able to use any computer I had around to make the print, which was very convenient to do. So if I did need to print something again or change it, just go to my computer, fix the GX code, and then send it to the printer and it would print. The only two issues I really had with Wi-Fi is sometimes if the print was too big or it was too detailed, it took a long time to send and ended up failing a few times. So as long as your print's reasonable, you won't have any issues. Now, one other little issue is if your computer went to sleep for some reason while it was trying to send it to the printer, it would fail and abort. So just make sure that your computer doesn't sleep after a minute or two and you shouldn't have a problem with that. So, but I really preferred the Wi-Fi solution to print just because it was wire-free. I could put the printer anywhere within the Wi-Fi network and I had no issues. Once the Creator Max downloads the GX file, it will then begin warming up to get ready to print. Now, before we talk about the printing process, the most important part of 3D printing is getting your print to stick to the build plate. So here with the Creator Max, it has this sticker on the build plate that actually worked pretty good. Now I did have some issues depending on the filament that I was using that it just wouldn't quite stick. So it would print a little bit, it looked like it was sticking, but as the print head moved around and there was just all these other factors, it would hit one another and they would bump into each other and then it would end up just being a big mess. So here is one print I was doing. I tried to print 2 of these phone stands at once. One of them popped off and then it just got stuck and started wrapping around. And here you can see it just left a bunch of goop on there. So highly recommended to watch the print as it gets going or you're gonna have a big pile of mess in there. But as long as it could print the first few layers just fine, I really didn't have any issues. Now, if I did, I would then add a raft. And for whatever reason, whenever I added a raft, it always printed great. So the raft would stick down just fine, and then it would go on with the rest of the print. And other times, actually, I was having an issue where it wasn't sticking with any of the filaments. So I pulled off the sticker, put a new one on, and then I was having much more success. But mainly that was with the filament that they sent me here, this red transparent filament. Some of the other ones did struggle, so I did need to use a raft in that situation. But I did also see there's a glass attachment I could get for this to use a glass build plate. So I'm thinking about getting that one. I've heard that's a great way to use it. So far, everything's stuck. And then once the print is done, getting it off of the build plate was pretty difficult. So I ended up finding a little trick where if you have some little clippers like this, I would clip the very bottom corner and then I would use my little plastic scrapers here and scrape the rest of it off. It gets on there pretty good. So if I tried too hard, I felt like I was going to break the build plate. So I did find those little tricks. If you have any other tricks about getting your prints off the build plate, let me know in the comments below. But overall, I am pretty impressed with the build plate and its ability to adhere to it. And so overall, I was able to print a ton of things because if it doesn't stick properly, you're not gonna have a good print. One other little issue that I did have is when it was heating up, it would let a little bit of the filament come out of the nozzle. So it was just sitting there and then it would start printing and that little piece would get in the way. So I found that sometimes I would have to pause it, clean that up so that there wasn't anything dripping from the nozzles before it started the print. So it had a nice clean start. If I didn't do that, sometimes it got in the way and ended up causing problems later. And maybe I just need to clean out the nozzles or something like that. But for the most part, all the prints worked really well. The other parts is you need to make sure you learn about support. So I had an option set where it would only do a support on the bottom. So like here for my face, it didn't put a support here on my chest. That would have fixed my chin. So you just need to make sure that you learn about supports because if I had a few prints where it was trying to print in the middle of nowhere. So like some of these prints here, it's printing flat and there's this big gap. Well, it can't print that top part in the middle of nowhere. It needs to have support. So once I disabled that setting that I had turned on, then it was able to add supports here and all the prints worked really well. So you do have to learn a little bit about what the supports mean and what works best and how that all works to have really good prints. But in the end, I was very successful in what I was able to print with FlashPrint and the Creator Max. One really unique part about printing with the Creator Max is its dual extruder. So here I did this little test print where I'm printing with the 2 different colors, and it looks really cool, and it's a very high quality print. Now this was the second time I tried this. I tried it another time and I didn't use a wall, and I ran into all types of little issues. Now it was a bit hard to take off the raft from this. I found that sometimes it was really hard to do that, but I was able to clip it off. But with the dual extruder, overall, it worked really well. One other really important part about using the dual extruder is that you need to make sure that your build plate is perfectly level between the 2 different nozzles. Because if one nozzle is lower than the other, it will cause problems and you'll end up with something like this with both colors. So make sure that they are perfectly level when you're using the paper there. But overall, I'm really happy that the dual extruder can print all kinds of cool things. So here is a fidget cube that I printed. It was sticking too much between each color, so I wasn't able to get it to function properly. It came apart in pieces, but I think it's really cool that I was able to print with those 2 colors. This model, a lot of people are like, hey, this doesn't work right. And they didn't understand that you have to use this 2 different models on one print to get that to work. So I'm really happy with the dual extruder. I do need to get some more filament to really test out its capabilities, but it seems to do the job really well. After you've done your print and you removed it from the build plate, the last thing to do is clean up. Again, highly recommend getting some clippers like this so that you can clip off any part that isn't very smooth or to clip off the raft. This worked really well. And then now I have all kinds of different prints. So I have this holder for my Nintendo Pro controller, and I have these holders for my different game controllers. So there are just so many things that you can print with the Creator Max, and having it be an all-in-one solution was just super nice to be able to plug it in, get it going, and it starts printing. So I've learned a ton about 3D printing now. So if you're looking for something as like a first time printing machine, this was great to learn because I didn't have to deal with trying to get it to print right. That was working fine. I just had to learn what worked and what didn't. So adding a raft or not, if I needed the wall or not, and just a lot of little tweaks there, not necessarily tweaking what the printer can do. This can do it, it's just learning about the best ways in which it can. Overall, I am very impressed with what the Creator Max can do. Now, there were a few little things that could be improved, like I wish there were different spools that came with it, were a little bit longer, but I was able to solve that, no problem, just by printing another one. Or on the back, the little filament holder extruder part didn't work great, so I ended up just printing a little thing so it could feed a lot better. So it's really cool that you have the printer and then can fix little things on it. There's some other things like I want to make a better camera attachment, or I want to make an attachment for my clippers here on the side. And I'm able to do all that with a 3D printer. Like I said, it's never ending in what you can do with a 3D printer. So if you are looking into get into 3D printer, or you just want a really nice quality printer, the Creator Max can totally do it. It was nice that I could just start printing and then learn the little things I needed to on the go. I didn't have to learn about all the ins and outs of how the printer worked. I just needed to know how to print, and I was able to do so many different things. So if you guys have any further questions about the Creator Max, please let me know in the comments below. I'll also leave a link to it in the description if you want to pick one up. And if you guys want to see how I was able to use my phone to make a file like this to print, make sure you check out the video over here on the side. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.